Well, hello, and welcome back to the MB Fleet Series School. So, our last video was on the markers. So, I'm going to assume that folks are pretty comfortable with the markers on the units. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit about the sequence of play, as well as just trying to explain like generally how the game works when it comes with ships, and very specifically how the game works with my the porting that I've done with this game uh, into uh, into a computer version. And we'll kind of talk about how it's different than maybe what you're used to if you are used to the Fleet Series games. So I think the Fleet Series games, if you are familiar with it generally follows the sequence of play, but there's some very distinct differences. So the first thing we're going to look at before we get into actually talking about ships in specifics, we're going to go to the rules. So here we have a listing of the sequence of play. One thing that I think it's pretty easy to see right off the bat is honestly, it's not that complicated. Um, Essentially, the game runs in sequences of three turns: an AM turn, a um, a PM turn, and then a night turn. And in those turns, you essentially, in the AM turn, you do this first section, which is the strategic part. So lots of times I'll talk about how the things that you do in the strategic cycle, or like random events or weather or things like that. That stuff always happens on the AM turns. It doesn't happen on turn one, which is an AM turn normally. In fact, I don't know any instance where the game doesn't start on an AM turn. I think it's just pretty much set like that. So the first turn is always an AM turn, and a lot of things happen on it, but a lot of things don't happen. Essentially, random events don't happen on game turn one, but every time you hit the morning, you do have a weather phase. So, so I'll just kind of go over this. So essentially, you have your AM turn where you do your strategic plus your normal activity. Then you have a PM turn, which is your afternoon, where all you do is just an activity cycle, whether that's moving things around and the combat and all that jazz. And then you'll have a night turn where you do your activity cycle and then you'll do a terminal cycle. Okay, so essentially it just kind of repeats and it goes into a loop. And so by the end of the day, you'll have one strategic cycle at the very beginning of the morning, one terminal cycle at the end of the night, and then three activity cycles in between. Now, if we go into these, we notice there's random events, like things like we'll go over those when we go through the sequence of events in a little more detail. We have it calculates weather. You establish a deep mode on your submarines. You have a choice of doing that in the very beginning of the AM turn, and then you have to live with your decision. If you decide to do submarine mode of deep, then it'll stay deep for the whole day, those three turns. Then there is a strategic segment where you allocate a bunch of aircraft to strategic things, where you don't actually fly them around into hex to hex to hex to hex. You just plop them on a display that's attached to every zone on the game. So when I say zone, I mean things like this. Notice here, strategic. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the deployment phase, so it hasn't actually created the strategic displays yet, but and many of the things you would notice, like a little floating little diagram here, a little marker, and that's the strategic display. So for aircraft, you would drop them on there and do strategic missions. I don't really talk about that much because I think I said it in the last one. I don't really have. I've kind of made the interactive action segment something where you literally could do everything you want to do in strategic, but do it during the action segment, and it's a little more realistic and makes more sense to kind of do it that way. It also makes things a little less complicated. So let's talk about the activity cycles. That's where we're going to spend most of our time when we're talking about things you can do with a ship. So this activity cycle happens on all three turns, and essentially it just kind of goes in a big loop three different times, and then you get to this terminal cycle. And what do you do in each of these activity cycles? Well, first thing is you elect to launch cap. Then you possibly do replenishment for ships that are docked already or already in a hex where they could do at sea replenishment. So this is again before you activate any of your units. Okay, so that's a concept, right? So in Fleet Series, in order to move things around, you have to actually activate them. For ships, there's really only one way of activating them, and that's during the action phase. For aircraft, you kind of have two different ways of activating them per se. You can launch them to cap, or actually three, I guess. You could assign them to be strategic air, which means they're sitting in this little display floating over the map. You could put them on cap, or you could actually send them out and have them do missions. We're not going to talk too much about aircraft, but that's a kind of that's kind of spoiler for the aircraft talk. For ships, though, essentially, um, you at the very beginning, right before you actually do anything with them, if you have them already positioned, where they're already docked, or they're already in a hex where they can get replenished, you would get the option. The game will give you the option to actually perform replenishment. I've also added in a couple of phases into this piece that are not listed here of loading and unloading. Those are also phases that you'll be able to do if you're already docked. And I'll show you how to get docked. You only can dock in the action phase when you're actually moving things around. Okay. So prior to anything being activated, and after everything has been replenished, if you want to, then there'll be a local detection phase. At that point, basically what it's doing is it is um, if they're ships that are near each other or within two hexes of each other, essentially they're going to basically auto detect everything around them. If there's submarines within one hex of them, then there's a chance that they get detected. It doesn't always happen. It just depends on how many ASW factors you have. We talked about that yesterday. Every ship has an ASW factor, and we'll, I think I'll kind of show that in the when I'm doing my little demo. Um, okay, so then I'm not going to talk about tactical coordination. It's more of an aircraft thing. Let's see here. Okay, so the action phase. So this is the part at which you activate and move. That's what this action phase is. Essentially, it's a big loop. Now, the way the game comes out of the box is it utilizes action segments. I'm going to ignore that because we don't do that in this version of the game. The way the game does it from a paper standpoint, and they do this because I think they did this just because logistically it was just too hard to do it any other way. Um, you essentially take turns moving all of one type of stuff. So you roll a dice to see who moves first. Then the person that wins that initiative, they can then say, I want to move my subs, or I want to move my ships, or I want to move my air. Then the other person, then you roll again, and um, to find out who is the active player. It could be the same guy that was the first, or it could switch over to the second guy, and then that person determines what they do. So um, very soon after the game came out, uh, different gaming magazines and even the maker of this game in their series of videos or series of magazines called The General, they came out with different ways of actually doing this. So they all felt that, or a lot of people that reviewed this game, the Fleet Series game, thought that one place it could get the most improvement was by making the action phase more interactive, right? Where you don't just do everything all at once, because it created some situations where literally a ship could roll right up, could could go like four hexes right to a sub that it knows about, attack it, without the sub even getting a chance to get away. Um, so now what I did was I basically use the automation and the power of computing to basically get rid of this whole action phase. You, me, go, you go. Everything runs at the same time. You give orders, they all move at the same time consecutively, and it creates a much more dynamic thing. So, but that's how the rule states it should have done. At the end of the action cycle, you then remove detection if stuff has moved out of detection range. I've also changed this a little bit. Now, local detection is calculated at real time, especially if you have that setting set up. So essentially, what that means is, as ships are moving, as subs are moving during an actual cycle of one turn, they can actually go in and out of detection. Okay. Finally, at the end of the action phase, the all the planes land from cap, and then it repeats 3 times. And then at the terminal phase, anything that was launched during the strategic air phase in the AM turn now lands. Fuel is expended on the ships, right? So fuel is essentially expended every day. There is a we'll talk about that. Um, well, I might as well explain it now, just in case I forget. So, fuel is used if the ship uses fuel. Some ships don't use fuel because they just don't. The game doesn't want to track that. And some there's a rule that is recommended in that I've used here that says that lots of times people use a house rule where if the ship doesn't move more than 2 hexes in any one of the AM, PM, or night. In other words, if during all 3 of these phases, at no time does that ship move more than 2 hexes in any one of these turns, then it doesn't actually use fuel. Okay, so that means that if you're not like traveling things a distance, uh, you'll use less fuel. Okay. Repair happens. That's for bases. For every other type of unit, things don't repair. There is a random event that might happen that one of your damaged air squadrons might get repaired, but generally nothing gets repaired in the game other than bases. If a ship gets damaged in the beginning of the game, it is going to stay damaged until it's dead or until the mission's over. Um, and then at the very, very end, the strategic detection is removed if it qualifies to lose strategic detection. Essentially, you have 2 types of detection: strategic and local. Strategic is like it's been detected by either a satellite or it's been detected by something in the strategic air phase, or it moves right next to a base. That's a strategic detection. That means the difference between strategic and local detection is that it's much easier for a ship to lose to go undetected if it's only locally detected. If it's strategically detected, certain things have to happen for it to be. So essentially, just keep in mind that when you strategically detect, so lots of times people will try to, at least using aircraft, will try to strategically detect ships that are already locally detected so that it's harder for that ship to um, uh, get away. Now, in the paper game, um, one other advantage of the map, right? If we look here at our game, you'll notice that I don't see any enemy. So that is different than the paper game. In the paper game, when you're sitting there with a map on a table, you can see all the pieces. So there's a lot of like house rules about like dummy markers and things that kind of like, in other words, if the aircraft carrier task force, the Russians will always know where the American carriers are because they could see the markers. They just can't attack it unless they detect it. So detection is everything. Well, detection is also everything in my game, but I add to it the fact that if you don't detect it, you can't see it. So even though you may know generally that I know that Kiev is probably somewhere, the Kiev task force is probably somewhere around here. I actually don't know where it is, so I got to go find it or just avoid it. Okay. Um, So that's about it as the sequence of play. So really, when you think about it, essentially the game is just after the after the turn starts for 3 turns, you'll have to live with whatever weather is determined for that particular zone. You will 3 times in a row essentially activate ships that you want to move them, and then they finish their move. Then the next turn happens, you do it again. Then the next turn happens, you do it again. Then the day's over. The terminal phase kicks in, the brand new day starts, day 2 starts, and you start all over again. So a ship can move 3 times during a turn. I'm sorry, a ship can move 3 times a day, and it can move so many hexes a turn. We talked about it last time. If we look here at the BB New Jersey, we notice it has a movement factor of 4. If we click over here, we see the New Jersey. It has a factor of 4, which means that if we count it up and use math, that means best case scenario, it can move 12 hexes in this day. That means it can get about, off map. Okay. Um, 4, then 4, then 4. Uh, that's assuming you activate it. And there's really no reason not to activate ships each time, unless you just not don't want to move it. You want to wait around. Maybe you're trying to conserve fuel, but you don't have to conserve it. You can still activate it and move it 1 or 2 spaces, and you're not going to use any fuel as long as you don't go over 2 in any one of the 3 phases. Okay, so key things to understand about ships. Um, Individual ships. So let's take a look at this stack here. In this stack, if we look, we have I'm gonna double click this. I'm also gonna get a little closer in here and see if I think I'm already in 3. Hold on a second here. I'm gonna get like super in close. Let's hopefully this doesn't take too long for the game to zoom in. I kind of want to get really close in on the ship so you kind of understand everything that's going on. I don't think right now showing the a large scale of the map really helps from what I'm trying to display. Okay, so I can still see quite a bit. All right, so anyway, if we look at all these different ships, right? You got the New Jersey, you got the Biddle, okay? So, and you have 2 other ships, the Merrill and the Sems, 2 destroyers. Okay, so right now, these 4 ships are all in the same hex, but they and because they're all not they're not grouped in any way, then they're kind of considered uh, they could provide support to each other. Okay. um, the way the game works is ships that are in a group can provide support to other ships within that same group, and ships that are not in a group can provide support to ships that are not in a group. So what does that mean? Why don't you just have everything in no group? Then you don't have to worry about it. Well, there's benefits of going in groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a task force. Okay. So in the deployment phase, you have this option to create task force. So I'm going to show you how to create a task force and why would you create a task force. Okay. So task forces have a certain order of ships. So you kind of want the way the game kind of works is you probably want most of the time you sort of want your important ships followed by other ships in the order. So currently these are all just randomly put there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the New Jersey and I'm going to create a task force. So now, what's the first thing you see? Okay, so first thing you see is that it says it's now a group and it's based on the New Jersey. Notice the way this display works. It shows, and this is how this, I probably never explained this part here, but so the way it works is notice how everything's kind of exploded out so you can see everything that's in the same hex. So you have this task force. Anything on the upper arc is stuff that's in that task force. Anything that's below the arc is in the same hex, but not part of the group. So currently, only one ship's in the group, the Jersey. Thus, the task force is named Allied Task Group and it shows the first ship in the position. All right, so now I'm going to add more ships to it. Normally you want like the New Jersey is in position 0, the very first element of the group. So what you really want is you want to have good ships that are that are next in the group. Any ship that's next in the group will provide support if the New Jersey is attacked. Okay, so if the New Jersey is attacked, then whatever ship is next in the task force, and that wraps around to the front, if it's the last thing, but that ship that's following it will provide its close air. So that means that New Jersey, which has a close air factor of 7, if the next thing we do, and I'm going to go ahead and add the Biddle to it, it says here I have an option, join Allies TG, I do. Now we show the New Jersey and the Biddle are now in this group. And the Biddle is now the second position. And the Biddle has a close air of 6. So that means that a total of 13 close air points will be available to help defend the New Jersey. Okay. Now, in addition to that, the Biddle also has the advantage of having actual area air. Now, area is used no matter what ship is being attacked in the task force. That's the difference between close air and area air. Close air is only provided to the ship it's protecting, which is the one that's right in front of it, and long air, area air is always provided no matter what. Now, I think I mentioned this in the last video, but for different surface-to-surface missiles, you have fast surface-to-surface missiles, which are normally some of the air-launched. A lot of the Soviet missiles are fast SSMs. Fast SSMs cause the area air factor to be halved when you're defending against them. Sea skimmers make the close air halved. Okay, some missiles are fast and sea skimmers. I can't remember which ship has it, but some have both. That means that both sections get reduced by half. All right, so now we have noticed that since the Jersey is still the first one in this task group. Notice it's a task group. It's not a task force yet. A task group is a group of ships that has up to more than one, but less than 3 combat ships in it. Okay? That doesn't mean a bunch of transports or other types of ships. It only counts combat ships, which are carriers, destroyers, battleships, cruisers, cutters, frigates, patrol craft, and corvettes. I think those are all of the combat ships. Everything else, like an amphibious assault ship or a convoy or a replenishment ship, combat support, all those are not surface combat, and they do not count toward task group, whether it's a task group or task force. Right now, it only has 2. As soon as I add this, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and add the Maryland. Once I do that, this should change to a task force. Okay. I think it's naming it until it saves it at the end. Yeah, let me see here. Yeah, so it has 3, or maybe I'm wrong. I think it needs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It needs 4. So to become a task force. Okay. So I'm going to join this last guy. There we go, task force. So now we show all 4 of these ships are in the task force. Because it has 4 combat ships, it is considered a task force and not a task group. You may be asking, Mark, why do you keep talking about task forces and task group? What's the difference? Well, I'll tell you what the difference is. So in combat, if ships are part of a task force, the on the defense roll, okay, essentially whenever something's attacked, normally the defenders will count up the type of stuff that's defending, right? Like close air, area air, right? And the defenders will make a roll. So if we weren't using a computer, the defenders would take a die and they'd roll a die, and we'd look at a big matrix that on how many points of defense that we have, and then that'll end up with a number. That number is a defensive modifier. That number will get taken off the attacker's roll. Now, if you're in a task force, then when the defender does his defense roll, he gets a bonus of 2 points. If he's in a task group, he gets no bonus. If he's not in a task force or a task group, then it's an actual, the attack, you get a -4 to your roll. Okay? Lots of these show up in the combat thing. So if I get somebody's figures wrong, please excuse me, right? I've written the rules a long time ago. But essentially, task forces are great. They give you a bonus. Task groups are good in the fact that you don't get any negative modifiers. But if you're outside of a task group, either you're in a group that has maybe just one, or I think it's, yeah, one or two. Once you have two, you're a task group. So the minute that you have one combat ship in a group with other things like things it's escorting, it turns into, it doesn't, it's not a task group anymore. At that point, I just call it a ship group. I had to come up with a name for a group that's neither a task group nor a task force, so I call it a ship group. So you'd see it, it'll say Allies Ship Group. That just means that, hey, it is a group. They can defend each other, but they don't get any bonuses. In fact, they get a detriment. There's a penalty because they're not in a task group or task force. Once they're in a task group, then they don't have any modifiers whatsoever for that particular uh, matter. But once they become a task force, then you actually get bonuses. Okay, so you kind of always want to try to keep your stuff together in task forces. Now, how many things can you put in a task force? Well, the game will limit you to 12 combat ships max in a group. You can have as many other ships as you want. I could put 50 cargo ships in a group. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but you could do it. You, as a human player, are limited to 12 at most, 12 um, combat ships in a group. In fact, you're limited to 12 ships, combat ships in a hex, period. Even if they're not even grouped together. You can't have more than 12 surface combats in any particular hex. Um, the game will warn you, as in your movement phase, the game will warn you if you have too many ships in the same. There'll be a special phase that pops up called overstacking, and it'll tell you that, hey, you got too much stuff in there. If it's still during the middle of the turn and you still have opportunity to move ships out of it, then I advise you to do so. I advise you to plan out your moves, take a look at how much movement points people have, and what you want to make sure is you want to make sure that at the end of that action phase, i.e., at the end of the turn, AM, PM, or night, you do not have more than 12 surface combat ships in the same hex. Because if you do, the game will require you to scuttle. Okay? Alright, so now this is a group. So I'm going to double click on this, so now I don't see the group anymore, I just see the symbol. I did mention about that ship group. If it is a ship group, you can tell right off the bat without putting your cursor over it. You can tell it's a ship group and not a task force or task group. See, a task force or task group has the solid squares at the corners. The ship group will have squares, but the squares will be empty, so they'll be green inside. Okay. All right. Now, how do you move things? Okay, so right now I can move them just because the game is in like deployment mode, meaning I could move things around if I wanted to. But let's just simulate that it's actually in the activation phase. So what happens is for each on each turn, you're basically going to have the ability to um, activate units. Okay. Um, Prior to activating them, you can group them in task forces and task groups. Okay, so I didn't show that. It doesn't really show it on this thing, but essentially right here, right before the action phase starts, there's a phase called grouping phase, right? So I think it says group or ungroup um, phase. I provide it for the player. Essentially, um, before you activate things, you have the opportunity to look at the screen, see where things are, and you can break up and recreate groups to your heart's content. Okay, you cannot create groups where some are docked and some aren't. The game won't allow you to create a group of docked and undocked ships. Um, I think that's really the only restriction. Uh, so so when the turn starts, every turn starts, you'll get an opportunity to put ships into groups. Notice, right? This one guy, he's alone, so you can't do anything with him. I can create this task force right now, but as soon as this mission ends, it'll determine that he doesn't have enough for be a group, and it'll put him right back to being a individual ship. So the game in certain phases where it allows you to add things together to groups, it'll kind of give you grace at least while you're messing around. It won't automatically keep ungrouping things if it doesn't have enough ships. Because if I didn't do that, then you would never be able to create a group because you'd have to start it with putting one in there, and there's one is not enough for a group. So it allows you to create groups even though they have one ship in them. But the minute that this phase ends, the logic will uncreate the group and put it back as just a single ship. Here is another group here. This has got the Nimitz in it. All right, this has got the, let's double click on here. So here we got the Comme de Grace, it says Spruance, you got the Nimitz, a couple of cruisers, and 3 destroyers. Okay, so we would want to in deployment phase, you can create the task force right now, or you could wait till the action phase is about to beginning. The game will give you one more opportunity. It gives you every turn before you activate anything. It gives you the opportunity to group things up. Then it'll ask you to activate things. So at that point, then you'll pick the group because at any point it's turned into a group. It's essentially all these ships are hidden. They're not really part of the group. They're not really on the map anymore. They are. You can see them, but the game considers everything to group together in a single icon. Like for instance here, right? I wouldn't have for this guy. I wouldn't have to activate the Biddle. I just activate the task force, and everything in it gets activated. The minute that you activate, then during the moving phase, you'll be able to move them. And so during the moving phase, I'm not in the moving phase, and I'm not gonna try to navigate all the way to the moving phase. But just imagine that we're in the moving phase. In the moving phase, for that one turn, you'll be able to create a pathing for them. Once you finish creating the pathing, then it will snap back and it'll show you the oh heck, I don't really want to go through this, but I'm gonna try to guess to the action phase. Hopefully it'll be quick. And hopefully we don't have terrible. Okay, I'm gonna skip a bunch of phases to get to the. Yeah. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I don't want to do that either. I'm not gonna even launch cap or anything. I'm just want to skip past this and get into the movement phase. Pre-action. Okay, so we're now in the movement phase, or we're almost in the movement phase. We're in that phase where I said you have the opportunity to do it. If you look over here in the sequence of play, you'll see that right now we're in the pre-action phase group management. We're about to then pick whether you want to move ships at high speed. It then goes into a big loop. It doesn't show everything in a loop because I didn't want to make this thing a huge thing, but maybe I'll change that now that I've made this scrollable. But anyway, so uh, yeah, so we're right before we activate anything. Okay, so I'm not gonna. I could use this opportunity to create this task force, but I'm not going to just for display sake. So then we go into, yeah, high speed. I don't want to do anything there. Oh, and if you get annoyed by these pop-ups, you can set them to go off, right? You go up here to here, you set auto show help first time. I click that off. Now it says help message will only pop up when you're hitting the button on the top menu. Okay? So in other words, it's not going to keep popping up. Thank goodness. All right. Oh, and here's the strategic display for every single phase. So you double click it, you notice, so it's got clear weather here. You can tell if there was storm or squall. You'd see a marker here that shows storm or squall. I think I mentioned yesterday about the command failure. If it was command failure, it would also show up here somewhere. I can't remember where, but the command failure marker would show up in here. Okay, anyway, um, those boxes are for the different missions that you can assign aircraft when during the strategic air mission phase. I usually skip all that stuff. All right, so now we're going to activate stack. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate. I'm going to activate this Boston. I'm going to activate him. It's asking me, do I want him to go at normal speed or full speed? Full speed means he'll have one extra movement point. The bad thing about it is if there's anything, literally, if there's anything within 5 hexes of him, enemy, he'll automatically get strategically detected. So you got to be really careful about using full speed. You only want to do it when you know this thing is playing catch up and it's not going to get detected. Or if you don't care if it gets detected, then you could pick full. I'm not. I keep it normal. Okay. I'm not going to activate any other ships other than some of these ships here. I'll activate the Deo. Deo. I'm going to activate him. All right. He's activated. I'm going to activate this guy. Okay. Now it's asking me if I want to activate any aircraft. I'm not gonna, just because I don't want to. I don't want to deal with it. All right. So right now the Americans, I've basically activated these 3 ships. Okay. Let's move on. All right. Orders. All right. So in the orders phase, you can do quite a number of things. Okay. Um, you can tell it's a move. So notice all 3 of them have this yellow symbol, which I think I've shown you guys. If you pop up the help button, you'll see it is you can either see what you do in this phase. You can view the scenario rules. You could also view what the unit indicators are. So bars across the top, you notice it says yellow. It says no orders. During the action phase, units with movement points remaining must be given a destination or be put in some mode that allows it to stay in the current hex, loiter, or etc. Units with this indicator will show you which unit you need to give orders to. The orders phase will not allow you to advance unless these are addressed. So the game's telling you that, hey, I mean, you need to create orders for all these 3 guys. Okay, so what can I tell them to do? Well, I can tell um, I can tell the Deo. I want him to move down here. Basically, I want him to eventually join this battleship. I kind of want to have him on an intercept course, and so to give this guy another escort to make this task force a little stronger. So I'm going to give him orders. I'm going to tell him to go here, 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 here. Now notice I can give him orders much longer than his range, which is fine. The game will keep track of that and will only move him 4 during this turn, and will move him 4 in the next turn. So essentially, he's going to get here, as long as he isn't blown up, he's going to get here by the end of the PM shift. Okay? Um, let's see, what else can you do? So instead of moving, I can also, instead of giving him movement orders, I can put this sub in loiter slash patrol mode. So let's try that. If I do that, now it shows that he doesn't have to move, and he's got this blue bar. If we go back to that display, the blue bar will tell you that he's in patrol mode. Now, what patrol mode means for ships is that if the ship has, it's a way of you saying, hey, listen, I don't want him to move, but I have to do. I'll tell him to do something. So I'm going to tell him just hang out. He'll use one of his movement cycles, so to speak, to stay in this hex, but it wouldn't be considered a move. It will remove his movement allowance, but it wouldn't count as like a moving. So in other words, it wouldn't count against the 2 hexes that require. Now you don't care anyway for subs. Subs don't use up fuel anyway, so you don't really care about that. But if it was for a surface ship, by telling them to loiter or patrol. The best use of that is when you're either waiting for something to catch up to it, or you're trying to have a better chance of detecting submarines. Uh, Ships that are sitting in patrol mode, especially ones that have good ASW factor, have a very good chance of, or have a better chance of detecting submarines within 1 hex of each other. So to use that as a, let's talk about detection real quick. So, um, oh darn, I was in the, it was easier if I was in the deployment phase because I could just move things. But essentially, let's look at a ship here and let's kind of talk about it. All right. So the way Fleet Series works for ships is they have a couple of different detection zones. In an area of 2 squares or 2 hexes all the way around the ship is called the extended zone. And as long as it's not, as long as it isn't a storm, that ship can basically detect ships pretty much automatically if they are within 2 hexes of them during that detection phase. Now, during the action phase, things are shortened a little bit, and the minute that a ship moves within 1 hex of something, then it automatically detects it. Okay. For submarines, however, submarines can only be detected if they're either in the hex with the ship or they are in a adjacent hex. So this guy can never detect a sub that's more than 1 hex away from him. And how do subs get detected? Well, essentially, a little roll is made by the computer in the back, and it basically looks at all of the ships in the group and it adds up the ASW factors. For this, it's 1.5 points and 3 points. So it's going to be about 9 points used in that check. It's actually not that great. You'll see a lot of ships like, well, notice he has a 9, so he detects things pretty well, and frigates and things have good ones too. Like some of the Perrys have a very good 9. Um, Carriers are usually pretty good because of their Sea Kings that they have, which have good sonobuoys and detecting, right? So anyway, um, so that's detection zones. Subs can be detected if they're within 1 hex of ships. Um, uh, Ships can be detected by them if they're within 2 during the detection phases. During movement, I believe I check just 1 hex. Um, all right, so for every ship, you can either tell it to move or stay put with there. So I'm going to tell this guy to move. So I'm going to give him some movement orders. And I'm going to have him kind of go here. Okay? All right, so notice it snaps back, right? Because it's actually still in this location and it shows the destination there um, where it's going. Okay? All right, so this marker here is the destination. And this white line shows that, hey, this guy's going here. Now, what else can you do? Well, notice this thing tells me that I can do a cruise missile attack. The game is constantly calculating whether or not the ship can actually do attacks. It says I can do a cruise missile attack, so I'm going to go ahead and tell it to do it. So it's going to say cruise missile. It asks me what to target. It automatically figures out the range, which I believe for these guys is 25 hexes. So somehow that, wow, I didn't realize he could reach all the way up there. I want to attack here. So this is the guy. So it asks me if I want to target the airfield or the port, or I just want to cancel the attack. So I'm just going to cancel attack because there's no reason to do the attack right now. You can test out the attack, in your game. Um, so number of attacks. Okay, so let's talk a little about that. So if we look at this, um, so ships during the action phase. So every turn, a ship is going to be able to do up to 2 attacks. Subs can do 1 attack a turn, and aircraft can do 1 attack a turn as well. Subs can only do certain types of attacks. Let's see, this particular sub, which is a American Los Angeles, has the most weapons, thus it can do most of the stuff that it needs to do. This Boston could, if there was stuff around it that it could be attacked, that it could attack, it could, let's see. Well, number one, it tells you that it can do a cruise missile attack as well. Because you notice it has the cruise missiles. So it can do a cruise missile attack. Again, 25 range, and you would tell it what to attack. Um, it could do a torp attack, which means that it's attacking ships. It can do a ASW attack, which is attacking a sub. It could also do a surface-to-surface missile attack using its surface-to-surface missile um, arsenal. And I think I remember telling you that this particular guy, if you look up here, notice it shows, I don't know, I hope you can see this, but it shows SSM 1, so it has one group of SSMs, which is the Tomahawks, right? Because it shows an S of 5 on the marker. It also has an SSM2, one SSM2, which is harpoons. In fact, anything that has an SSM2, it's normally harpoons as the SSM2. It has 4 rounds of torps and it has 1 round of cruise missiles. Okay, that's what that means. It also says it's active um, because you activated it. It also says that its VP value is 8, which for most ships is the defense factor, which is that 8. If I click on the um, if I click on the New Jersey, it'll probably say 9, although I think it adds some points to that. 12. Okay, yeah. So for New Jersey, certain ships I add bonuses to it. So like battleships get an extra 3 points. Um, Actually, I think it's just 12 period. And I think for carriers, it's not just their defense. I think we add 5 to that. I think no 19. So let's see. VP 19. Oh, it's 9 plus. Yeah, I can't remember why. I can't remember why it's 19. I'll have to look at my code, but essentially it's a lot of points for a carrier. Um, yeah, I'm trying to remember why the heck it's why the heck it's 19. I'll have to check that out. Um, let's see here. Okay, so I think I talked about all the attack. So essentially, you don't have to. It's not either or. It's not attack or move. You can move and attack. Okay. The only real the only real difference is that um, that for a surface ship can do 2 different types of attacks. So it can't make 2 SSM attacks. It can't make 2 cruise missile attacks. It could make a cruise missile and an SSM. It can make a cruise missiles and an ASW attack. All those different combinations. Now, there's only one slight exception to that. So, um, if a group of ships, if this group has done a SSM attack, I do allow it to do a close combat attack, but it doesn't utilize the SSM portion of the close combat value. Notice for this ship, it has a close combat value of 40, but it has an SSM value of 12. So that means that 28 points of this close combat is for stuff that isn't the SSMs. Obviously, since it's a battleship, you probably know what that is. It's the big guns, right? So if this guy has already done an SSM attack and then he rolls into the same hex as an enemy or a base, then you could declare a close combat attack against ships that are in the same hex or a base that's in the same hex. And if you have already done an SSM attack, the game will still allow you to do a close combat attack, but it will take away the SSM points. It doesn't work the other way around. If I haven't done any attack at all, and I go into this base hex and I do a close combat attack, it's going to use both of the guns and the missiles. It'll use the full 40 points. Because it used the full 40 points, this group will not be able to do an SSM attack later on within that turn. Now, once the turn is over, all that stuff gets cleared. So, what does that mean? That means that this ship could do up to 3 SSM attacks a day. one each turn. You could also do 3 ASW or 3 cruise missiles, right? It doesn't have enough ammo to do three, but it could if it did. Um, I think that's about it. So let's see what other things I want to talk about. Okay, so when a ship gets, uh, so let's say I have some ships that have like something I want to load or unload. Well, um, when this ship goes to a port, let's say this ship is trying to get to a port. So I'm going to move this thing. I'm actually going to move it up here to say he's moving up there. So that's where he's actually going. When he gets to here, if he has enough movement points remaining, which for surface ships, they need 2 points left in their movement allowance in order to dock right then and there. If they dock right then and there, then before the next turn's activation, since they're docked, they'll have the ability to then do replenishment or load or unload troops or whatever. Now, note I'm using a terrible example, right? A battleship's not going to load troops, but it can, and it doesn't have to be replenished either. Well, it does because it could a battleship can give fuel points to other ships. So yeah, you might want to replenish that ship and refill its oil reserves so that it can provide oil to other ships. Anyway, so in order to do that, you have to be docked. Well, I give you a little more flexibility to that. If I make it into this hex and the next turn I start here, but I'm not docked, I will allow you to do certain things. Like, let's say that uh, uh, I'm a troop transport and I want to unload. Well, I can't unload until I get to that port. And then, after I get to that port at the end of the last turn and I dock, then I would be able to unload right then and there before the next turn. But I also give you the ability to actually dock in real time. And if the only way I allow you to dock or to unload stuff is if you start the turn, you start this new movement phase already in the dock. Then I allow you to just go ahead and just dock or just unload right then and there. If you do that, then it automatically finishes that ship's move for that turn. Okay, so um, this essentially, I definitely recommend and you can come talk to me about. I do have these rules PDFs. I don't want to necessarily just willy nilly disperse them, but um, but if you really want to start reading through here, give me a holler, and I'll see what we can do. Um, let's see. But again, um, this will sort of help, right? But the version that I've done is so far off from this that what I would recommend doing is you just go through the mission and you read all of the 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 the, the, the instructions. I tried to do a lot of good stuff here. Um, there's a lot of information here. It tells you about all the different things you can tell aircraft to go into. It tells you the things that you can do. I would say, mm, um, yeah, I mean, if you find major missing parts in this orders phase, then let me know. I can always update these things. But I think I generally have captured everything that's needed. Um, if you have any questions on other things ships can do or any type of clarification on what I just talked about, let me know. I do have a new Discord channel, so that is now. I'm going to post this. Let's see. Where am I going? I am going to post. Yeah, so on my channel, I just added a new Discord link. So for you people that are Discord aficionados, please join my Discord. I plan on making announcements on there. I plan on being available to answer questions or to, if you have certain things that you want to ask to be added in. I think that's a great place to do that. Who knows? If I get enough people in there, we can start doing live chats where, what have you, right? But so I'm going to post a picture of this because Facebook is like terrible about links and stuff. So I'll probably post a snapshot of this so you can see what the links are on this video when I post it to Facebook. But hey, it was a pleasure talking with you guys. I hope I covered most things that you could do with chips. If not, I'll try to catch it on the next video when we're talking about aircraft. All right, well, until next time, I really appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next video.